Imagine diving to free an anchor, only to lock eyes with a massive shark or feeling a sudden bump during a swim race. What would you do? Ordinary moments become life-or-death struggles in these gripping encounters with the ocean's fiercest predators. From a sailor's nightmare off South Africa to a lifeguard dodging a circling shark mid-rescue, these 6 stories of survival and bravery will leave you on the edge of your seat. On the morning of October 10, 2024, an experienced sailor, Jake Dawson, navigated his small sailboat along the coast of South Africa near Cape Town. At 42 years old, Jake had spent most of his life at sea, sailing through different waters around the world. The ocean was his sanctuary, offering both peace and adventure. This trip along the South African coast was a leisure voyage, allowing him to explore the scenic coastline at his own pace. That morning, the sea was calm, with clear skies above. Jake anchored his boat near a secluded bay, planning to spend the day relaxing and snorkeling in the warm waters. He prepared his gear, including a snorkel, flippers, and a knife for potential underwater challenges. After breakfast, he checked the anchor, which seemed caught on something below the surface. Jake donned his snorkel and flippers before diving into the cool, clear water. The visibility was good, allowing him to see several meters ahead. He swam toward the anchor, tangled in a mess of seaweed, rocks, and debris. Using his knife, Jake began to cut away the tangled seaweed. It was a slow process, but he remained focused, and his experience kept him calm. Jake suddenly noticed a large shape moving in the distance as he worked to free the anchor. At first, it was just a shadow, but then it became clear. A massive, great white shark was approaching. Its size was immense, larger than anything Jake had encountered before. The shark's movement was slow but powerful as it swam closer. Jake felt a surge of fear but knew he needed to stay calm. He tried to continue working on the anchor, hoping to free it quickly and return to the safety of his boat. However, he soon noticed something alarming. Remains of sea life and debris were stuck in the anchor chain. The scent likely attracted the shark, making Jake's situation even more dangerous. Aware of Jake's presence, the great white began to circle him slowly. Jake's heart raced as he tried to remain still, knowing that sudden movements could trigger the predator's instincts. He struggled to untangle the last piece of debris from the chain, but his hands shook. The shark circled closer, its dark eyes fixed on Jake, assessing whether he was prey. Jake finally managed to free the anchor, but the shark was now only a few meters away. He slowly started to ascend, keeping his eyes on the predator. Sensing Jake's movement, the shark accelerated slightly, its massive body easily cutting through the water. Jake knew he had to reach the surface quickly, but without making sudden splashes that could provoke the shark further. The great white was now closing in, its large mouth partially open. Jake's body tensed as he kicked upward, desperate to reach his boat before the predator made its move. Jake pushed himself upward, trying to maintain a steady rhythm while keeping an eye on the shark below. The predator followed closely, its massive shape cutting through the water with effortless power. Jake's lungs burned as he tried to stay calm, but fear made his heart pound faster. He was only halfway to the surface, but he could already see the outline of his boat above. It felt so close, yet still dangerously far. The great white suddenly accelerated, closing the gap in a burst of speed. Jake knew he was running out of time. He kicked harder, his flippers propelling him upward as fast as he could manage. The water churned behind him as the shark swam closer. Its dark eyes locked on him. Jake kept his body streamlined, minimizing splashes that might trigger an attack. With just a few meters left, Jake reached for the ladder hanging from his boat. His fingers grasped the bottom rung as the shark surged beneath him, its snout brushing against his flippers. The predator's presence was terrifyingly close. Jake pulled himself up quickly, using all his strength to hoist his body out of the water. The shark, thwarted by his sudden escape, bumped against the side of the boat before retreating slightly. Jake collapsed on the deck, breathing heavily, water dripping from his gear. He knew he was not entirely safe yet. The great white remained below, circling the boat slowly as if unwilling to give up its pursuit. Jake reached for a nearby flare gun, ready to use if the shark attempted to breach the water's surface. He fixed his eyes on the water, carefully watching the predator's movements. The shark circled a few more times before finally swimming away. disappearing into the deeper blue. Jake felt a wave of relief, but the reality of what had just happened settled in quickly. He had narrowly escaped a deadly encounter with one of the ocean's most powerful predators. Exhausted, he remained on the deck trying to process the terrifying ordeal. Once he regained strength, Jake checked his equipment and the boat to ensure everything was in order. He knew he needed to move away from the area. He started the engine and steered the ship away from the bay, his hands still trembling slightly from the experience. Back on shore later that day, Jake reflected on the encounter. The sea, which he had always loved, had shown its more dangerous side. A humbling sense of vulnerability had replaced the thrill of exploring the ocean. He knew he had been lucky to survive, and the memory of the shark's presence would stay with him for a long time. Despite the fear, Jake's respect for the ocean deepened. The encounter had been a stark reminder of nature's raw power and unpredictability. He remained committed to sailing, but with a renewed caution for the dangers that lurked beneath the surface. For Jake, the sea would always be a place of beauty and peril, where survival was never guaranteed. On the morning of October 20th, 2024, Tony Harris, a commercial fisherman, anchored his small boat off the coast of Kaikoura, New Zealand. At 48 years old, Tony was an experienced fisherman known for his dedication to the sea. He had spent over 2 decades fishing in New Zealand's waters, navigating rough seas and calm waves. His boat, the Sea Rover, was small but reliable, built to handle the demands of daily fishing trips. The day had been productive, with Tony pulling in a solid catch of snapper, grouper, and cod. The waters around Kaikoura were rich with marine life, and Tony enjoyed the routine of sorting and cleaning his haul under the clear sky. As the sun lowered in the sky, he cleaned the fish, tossing scraps and unwanted parts overboard. The water around the boat grew murky with blood, a common sight at the end of a long day at sea. Tony leaned over the side of the boat to dump the final bucket of fish waste. He was tired but satisfied with the day's work, focusing on finishing up before heading back to shore. Just as he emptied the bucket, the boat jolted violently. The unexpected impact nearly knocked Tony off balance. Startled, he grabbed the ship's side, trying to steady himself. Before he could react, the boat rocked again, this time with greater force. Tony looked over the edge and saw the large dorsal fin of a great white shark cutting through the water. The predator, likely drawn by the scent of blood and scraps, had mistaken the boat for prey. The sudden realization sent a wave of fear through Tony, but before he could step back, the shark struck again, slamming into the side of the boat. The impact threw Tony off balance, tumbling into the cold water. Disoriented, he resurfaced quickly, gasping for air. Panic surged through him as he found himself face to face with the massive predator. The great white circled slowly, assessing the unfamiliar presence in the water. Tony knew that his only chance of survival was to reach the side of the boat, but the shark's movements made that nearly impossible. Tony kept himself afloat, his eyes locked on the predator. The shark's dark eyes watched him intently, its powerful body moving gracefully beneath the surface. Tony tried to swim toward the boat, but each stroke felt heavy, the cold water sapping his strength. The great white closed the distance slowly, circling tighter with each pass. The boat seemed agonizingly far away, and Tony's muscles were already burning from the effort. He kicked harder, his movements deliberate and slow to avoid triggering the shark's instincts. The predator continued circling, its presence a constant reminder of how close Tony was to danger. He reached out desperately, his fingers brushing the boat's edge as the shark swam beneath him, its fin breaking the surface. Tony clung to the side of the boat, his fingers barely gripping the edge. He tried to pull himself up, but his wet hands kept slipping against the slick surface. The great white, still circling below, moved closer each time, its powerful body creating ripples in the water. Tony felt a surge of panic, knowing that sudden movements could provoke an attack. He took a deep breath and tried again, this time managing to hook one arm over the boat's edge. His muscles ached from the effort, but he had to keep going. The shark, sensing his movement, turned sharply and approached faster. Tony could see the predator's massive head below, its dark eyes locked on him. He used every ounce of strength to lift his body higher, finally getting his chest over the side of the boat. Just as he was about to pull himself onto the deck fully, the shark lunged, its snout bumping hard against the hull. The impact shook the boat, almost knocking Tony back into the water. Desperately, he pushed himself forward, rolling onto the deck as the ship rocked. He lay there for a moment, breathing heavily, his body trembling from the adrenaline and cold. Tony scrambled to his feet and reached for a harpoon gun he kept on board for emergencies. His hands were still shaking, but he loaded the harpoon quickly, eyes scanning the water. The great white had not given up. It circled slowly, keeping its dorsal fin visible as it swam around the boat. Tony knew the predator was still a threat, but he hoped the weapon's sight would keep it at bay. The shark made another pass, this time closer to the boat's stern. Tony aimed carefully, ready to defend himself if necessary. The shark paused briefly as if sensing the danger. After a tense moment, it began to retreat, slowly moving away from the boat. Tony lowered the harpoon, watching the predator disappear into the deeper water. Tony remained on the deck, his body slumped against the side of the boat. He was exhausted, his muscles sore from the struggle. The fear and adrenaline slowly faded, replaced by a heavy sense of relief. He had narrowly escaped what could have been a fatal encounter, and the reality of his survival began to sink in. Once he caught his breath, Tony started the boat's engine, eager to leave the area. He steered toward the shore, his mind replaying the terrifying moments in the water. The sea, which had always been a place of work and comfort, now felt more dangerous than ever. He knew that the encounter was a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of the ocean. Back at the harbor in Kaikoura, Tony docked the boat and stepped onto solid ground. He was still shaken, his legs weak from the ordeal. He took a moment to gather himself, feeling gratitude and disbelief. The encounter had left him with a deeper respect for the sea and its powerful inhabitants. Tony shared his story with other fishermen in the following days, warning them about the dangers of cleaning fish in open water. The experience had been a lesson in survival and humility, showing him how fragile human life could be in the face of nature's raw power. On September 15, 2024, Mia Thompson, a 27-year-old competitive long-distance swimmer, entered the waters off the coast of Santa Monica, California, for the annual open water swimming race. Mia had trained for years, participating in numerous events worldwide, hoping to make a mark in this prestigious race. Known for her endurance and focus, Mia had prepared diligently for the challenging conditions of the Pacific Ocean. The waters were rough, but the sky was clear, offering a promising start to the race. As the race began, hundreds of swimmers dove into the waves, eager to claim victory. Mia quickly found her rhythm, powerful strokes propelling her through the choppy water. She maintained a steady pace, gradually pulling ahead of the pack. The rough seas did not deter her. They motivated her to push harder. Her goal was to finish and win, and she was determined to maintain her lead. About halfway through the race, Mia suddenly felt something bump her leg. At first, she thought it was just a floating piece of debris, a common occurrence in open water races. However, the force of the bump was strong enough to break her rhythm, causing her to pause momentarily. She glanced around but saw nothing unusual, so she resumed her pace, trying to focus on the shoreline still distant ahead. A few minutes later, the bump came again, but it was more forceful this time. Mia felt a surge of fear as she realized what it could be. Her instincts told her that a bull shark was nearby, likely drawn by the commotion of the race. Mia tried to stay calm, knowing that panic could worsen the situation. She maintained a steady pace, trying not to draw more attention from the predator. The shark circled back, bumping her side with more force. Mia's heart raced as she struggled to keep her composure. She knew the shark was likely testing her, a common behavior before a potential attack. Mia kept swimming, her strokes slightly slower as she tried to assess the situation. Nearby kayakers, who were part of the race's safety team, noticed her distress and began paddling toward her. The shark continued to circle, staying close enough to keep Mia on edge. Each bump felt more deliberate, as if the predator was growing bolder. Mia's mind raced as she calculated her options. The shoreline was still far away, and the kayakers, though approaching quickly, were not yet close enough to provide immediate help. Mia knew she had to keep moving, even as fear made her muscles tense. Mia adjusted her strokes, trying to appear calm while increasing her pace slightly. She hoped to reach the kayaker's safety before the shark became more aggressive. The predator, however, stayed nearby, its dark shape visible beneath the surface. Mia's breaths came in quick bursts as she fought to maintain her rhythm, each stroke a battle against the sea and the terror rising within her. The kayakers closed the gap, but the shark was still circling. Mia could see them waving and shouting, trying to deter the predator. She kept swimming, her body straining from the effort, but her will to survive remained strong. Mia focused on each stroke, pushing herself to move forward despite the fear gripping her. The kayakers continued to close in, but the shark remained persistent, circling just below the surface. Mia felt the water shift around her as the predator moved closer, its presence constant and menacing. Her muscles burned from the effort, but she knew she had to keep swimming. The kayakers finally reached her, positioning themselves between Mia and the shark. One of them splashed the water aggressively, trying to create a barrier and scare the shark away. The predator paused, uncertain about the new threat. Mia seized the opportunity to swim toward the kayak, her strokes fueled by desperation and determination. The shark lingered for a moment, then suddenly surged toward the group. The kayakers reacted quickly, slapping their paddles against the water's surface, creating loud splashes. The noise seemed to confuse the shark, which slowed down and began circling again, its dark fin breaking the surface a few feet away. Mia, now close to the kayak, reached out and grabbed the side, her body trembling from exhaustion. With Mia holding on, the kayakers paddled steadily toward the shore. Mia clung tightly, her breathing ragged as she tried to recover from the terrifying encounter. The shark continued to follow, its movements slower as if losing interest. Mia kept her eyes on the shoreline, which seemed close and far. The shore grew nearer, and the water gradually became shallower. Sensing the decreasing depth, the shark finally turned away, disappearing into the deeper ocean. Mia felt a wave of relief as the threat faded behind her. The kayakers continued to paddle until they reached a safer distance from the open water, allowing Mia to climb into one of the kayaks. Mia slumped into the seat, her body shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. The swimmers ahead of her were still racing toward the finish line, unaware of the danger she had faced. A deep gratitude for survival replaced Mia's goal of winning. The race had taken a turn she had never imagined, testing her physical endurance and will to live. The kayakers guided her to shore, where medical personnel waited. They checked Mia for injuries and provided her with a warm blanket. Her muscles were sore and her body was cold from the water, but she was unharmed. Mia sat quietly, watching the waves crash gently against the shore. The ocean, once a place of competition and challenge, now felt different, beautiful and unpredictable. In the days that followed, news of Mia's encounter spread quickly. She received messages of support from fellow swimmers and ocean enthusiasts. Despite the fear she had experienced, Mia remained determined to continue swimming. The experience had changed her, giving her a new understanding of the sea's raw power. Mia decided to train even harder, not just for future races, but for her sense of strength and resilience. The race had been more than a test of endurance. It had been a test of survival. Looking back on the event, Mia felt fear and respect for the ocean. She knew she would return to the water with a deeper awareness of the risks and a renewed appreciation for nature's unpredictability. On September 2, 2024, Eddie Perez, a 25-year-old local surfer in Cocoa Beach, Florida, headed out for an early morning session with his friends. Eddie had grown up surfing these waters, spending countless hours riding the waves and perfecting his skills. Known among the local surf community for his passion and fearless approach, Eddie rarely missed a dawn session. The Atlantic Ocean had always felt like home to him, its familiar and thrilling waves. The ocean was calm but promising that morning, with small swells rolling in. Eddie and his friends, Dan and Carlos, paddled out eagerly, enjoying the quiet before the beach got crowded. The sun had just begun to rise, casting an orange glow over the water. Eddie felt relaxed, focused on catching a few more waves before heading to work later that day. As they rode the waves, a lifeguard's voice crackled over the beach's loudspeakers, announcing a shark sighting in the area. The warning advised swimmers and surfers to exercise caution, but Eddie and his friends dismissed it. They had heard similar warnings many times before and had never encountered any real danger. The trio decided to go for one last wave before calling it a day. Eddie paddled out farther, determined to catch a good wave before leaving. As he waited, a sudden sharp pain shot through his right calf. He looked down and saw a medium-sized shark clamped onto his leg. The pain was intense, and Eddie's heart raced as he realized what was happening. The shark's grip was strong, its teeth cutting deep into his flesh. Eddie tried to kick the shark away, his instincts taking over. The water churned around him, turning red as blood poured from the wound. The shark held on for a moment longer before finally releasing him. Eddie's leg felt numb, but the sight of his blood quickly brought the reality of the situation back into focus. Dan and Carlos noticed the commotion and paddled toward Eddie as fast as they could. They reached him quickly, pulling him onto Dan's board. Eddie lay on his back, his leg bleeding heavily. The water around them was stained with red, a clear signal to any nearby predators. The friends knew they needed to get Eddie to shore quickly, as the scent of blood could attract more sharks. With Dan supporting Eddie and Carlos paddling beside them, the group began the slow journey back to land. Eddie's pain was overwhelming, but he tried to stay calm, knowing panic would only make things worse. His leg throbbed with each movement, and he felt weak from the blood loss. His friends moved steadily, but the distance to the shore seemed impossibly far. The trio paddled together, their movements urgent but careful. Eddie's body shook from the shock and the cold water. Dan and Carlos kept encouraging him, pushing forward with determination. Eddie could see the shore getting closer but knew they were not safe yet. Dan and Carlos kept paddling as fast as they could, each stroke a race against time. Eddie's breathing was shallow, his face pale from the pain and blood loss. The shore was visible now, but the distance still felt daunting. The friends knew they needed to keep moving, aware that the scent of blood could attract more sharks at any moment. Eddie's leg throbbed, the wound stinging in the salty water. He felt himself getting weaker, his body struggling to maintain consciousness. Dan adjusted his grip, making sure Eddie was secure on the board. Carlos stayed close, scanning the water for any signs of movement. The fear of another shark encounter drove them forward, but exhaustion was taking its toll. As they neared the shallower waters, a wave approached. Dan and Carlos used it to help push them closer to shore. Eddie tried to hold on. His strength was almost gone. The wave carried them forward, bringing them within reach of the beach. Alerted by beachgoers, lifeguards rushed into the water, helping pull Eddie onto the sand. Eddie collapsed on the beach, his leg still bleeding heavily. Lifeguards quickly applied pressure to the wound, using towels to slow the bleeding. Paramedics arrived shortly after, providing immediate medical care. They stabilized Eddie's leg and prepared him for transport to the nearest hospital. Exhausted and shaken, Dan and Carlos watched as their friend loaded into the ambulance. At the hospital, Eddie underwent surgery to repair the deep gashes in his calf. Doctors managed to stop the bleeding, but the recovery would be long. The shark's teeth had caused significant damage, and Eddie faced months of rehabilitation before returning to surfing. The incident had tested not only his physical limits, but also his mental strength. News of the attack spread quickly through the local surf community, sparking discussions about safety and the risks of early morning sessions. Eddie's experience reminded him of the ocean's unpredictability. While he knew the waters well, the encounter showed him that nature could be beautiful and dangerous. As Eddie recovered, he thought often about the day. The pain and fear had been overwhelming, but the support of his friends had made the difference. He felt grateful for their quick actions, knowing things could have worsened. Despite the trauma, Eddie remained determined to return to the ocean, though with a deeper sense of caution and respect. Months later, Eddie stood on the shore again, watching the waves roll in. His leg was still healing, and his strength was not fully back, but his love for surfing remained strong. The ocean, which gave him joy and pain, still called to him. He knew it would take time, but he was ready to face the water again, this time with a newfound awareness of the risks and a stronger respect for the power of the sea. On January 4, 2024, a skilled lifeguard, Emma Collins, was on duty at Bondi Beach, one of Australia's busiest beaches. Emma, 28 years old, had worked as a lifeguard for nearly a decade. Known for her strong swimming skills and calm under pressure, she had rescued countless swimmers from rip currents and sudden waves. Growing up near the beach, Emma felt at home in the ocean, understanding its beauty and dangers. The beach was packed with tourists and locals enjoying the summer sun that morning. The water was clear and the waves were mild, creating an ideal setting for swimmers and surfers. Emma watched over the crowd from her lifeguard tower, scanning the water for any signs of trouble. It was a routine day until she noticed a figure far beyond the designated swimming zone, struggling to stay afloat. Without hesitation, Emma grabbed her rescue board and sprinted toward the water. She paddled quickly, her strong arms cutting through the waves with practiced ease. As she got closer, she saw that the swimmer was distressed, their arms flailing weakly. Emma felt a surge of urgency, knowing that time was running out. She paddled faster, determined to reach the swimmer before exhaustion overwhelmed them. Just as Emma was within a few meters of the swimmer, she spotted a dark fin slicing through the water nearby. Her heart sank as she realized what it was. A large shark was approaching. Emma's training kicked in, but she knew this rescue would be different. She reached the swimmer, who was gasping for air, and instructed them to grab onto the board. Emma positioned herself between the swimmer and the approaching shark, trying to create a barrier. The shark made its first pass, swimming uncomfortably close to them. Emma could see its shadowy form below, circling slowly. She felt a rush of fear but remained focused, knowing that panic would only worsen things. The swimmer clung to the board, their breathing rapid and uneven. Emma kept her eyes on the shark, which continued to circle, each pass bringing it closer. She knew they had to start moving toward the shore, but the distance seemed impossibly far. The predator's presence made every stroke feel dangerous. Emma paddled slowly, trying not to make sudden splashes that could provoke the shark. The shark suddenly changed its pattern, moving more aggressively. Emma's heart pounded as she felt a surge of water behind her. The shark was now closer than ever. The swimmer, sensing the danger, tightened their grip on the board. Emma kept paddling, her movement steady but cautious, using her body to shield the swimmer as much as possible. The shore remained distant, and Emma felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The shark made another pass, this time coming within an arm's length of Emma. She reached for the safety whistle around her neck, blowing it loudly to deter the predator. The noise momentarily confused the shark, buying Emma and the swimmer a few precious seconds. Emma knew they had to keep moving despite the overwhelming fear. She paddled with strength, urging the swimmer to hold on tight. The shark, still circling, seemed unwilling to give up its pursuit. Emma could see people on the shore pointing, aware of the unfolding danger. The situation had become a race against time, with the ocean testing every bit of Emma's skill and courage. Emma kept paddling, her muscles burning from the effort. The swimmer clung tightly to the rescue board, their face pale with fear. Emma could feel the tension in the water, knowing the shark was still nearby. The predator's shadow moved below, circling them slowly. Emma maintained a steady pace, her strokes deliberate to avoid drawing more attention from the shark. The shoreline felt distant, but Emma was determined to reach it. The shark made another pass, coming close enough that Emma could see its outline beneath the surface. She raised her arm, signaling to the lifeguards on the shore. They had noticed the danger and ready to jet ski for a fast response. Emma knew they had to keep moving to buy more time for the rescuers to reach them. The swimmers' breathing was shallow and their bodies shook from cold and fear. Emma adjusted her position, ensuring they remained securely on the rescue board. She fixed her eyes on the shark, which circled wider now as if deciding whether to attack or retreat. Emma felt a rush of hope as she saw the jet ski speeding toward them. But she knew the shark's unpredictable behavior could change everything in seconds. Sensing the increased commotion, the shark became more aggressive. It darted forward, coming close enough that its dorsal fin broke the surface next to Emma. The sight was terrifying, but Emma kept her movement slow and steady, hoping to keep the shark at bay. She felt the swimmer's grip tighten, their panic rising. Emma focused on keeping them calm, knowing that any sudden action could trigger the shark to strike. The jet ski finally reached Emma and the swimmer. The jet ski rider, a fellow lifeguard, positioned the ski between them and the shark, creating a temporary barrier. Emma quickly helped the swimmer onto the ski, ensuring they were secure. As she climbed aboard, she glanced back at the shark, still circling but maintaining more distance. The engine's roar confused the predator, causing it to slow its pursuit. The jet ski sped toward shore, with Emma holding onto the swimmer to keep them steady. The water churned behind them as the shark followed briefly before returning to the open sea. Emma focused on the approaching beach, her heart pounding with relief and exhaustion. The shore, once distant, was now within reach. As they arrived, beachgoers cheered, relieved to see Emma and the swimmer safe. The lifeguards rushed to help, guiding the swimmer onto the sand and checking for injuries. Thanks to Emma's quick actions, the swimmer was shaken but unharmed. Emma, though exhausted, felt a wave of relief as the reality of the rescue set in. She had faced one of the ocean's most feared predators and managed to protect a life. The swimmer was taken to a nearby medical tent where they were treated for shock and mild hypothermia. Emma sat down for the first time, her body still shaking from the adrenaline. She watched the waves roll in, feeling fear and gratitude. The ocean, which had always been both a workplace and a passion, had shown its unpredictable nature again. In the days following the rescue, Emma's bravery became a local news topic. The story highlighted her quick thinking and experience as a lifeguard. Emma, however, remained humble, knowing that the ocean's dangers were always present. The incident served as a reminder of the risks that came with her job and the importance of being prepared for the unexpected. Emma continued her work as a lifeguard, now with an even stronger sense of duty. The rescue had tested her skills and courage, reaffirming her commitment to keeping swimmers safe. The memory of the shark encounter stayed with her, a symbol of both the sea's power and the thin line between danger and survival. As she returned to her lifeguard tower each day, Emma felt more aware of the ocean's unpredictable nature and her strength in fear. On March 6, 2024, Carlos Mendez, an experienced spearfisherman, set out for a solo trip near a remote reef in the Bahamas. At 35, Carlos had spent years exploring the underwater world, diving deep in search of fish in some of the most stunning yet isolated locations. He loved the challenge of spearfishing, a skill he had developed over time, relying on both patience and precision. The calm waters and vibrant reefs of the Bahamas had always been his favorite hunting grounds. The day began with clear skies and warm water, ideal conditions for diving. Carlos anchored his small boat near the reef, preparing his gear for the day ahead. He strapped on his wetsuit, secured his fins, and grabbed his spear gun before slipping into the water. As he descended, the underwater world came to life with colorful corals and various fish darting through the currents. Carlos soon speared his first catch, a sizable snapper, before securing it to the stringer attached to his belt. He continued diving, moving carefully around the reef to avoid disturbing the fish. Over the next hour, he caught a few more fish, adding to his haul. With his stringer getting heavier, he decided it was time to surface and return to the boat. Carlos suddenly felt a sharp tug on his belt as he reached the surface. At first, he thought it might be tangled in the reef, but the force was too strong. He turned to see a medium-sized reef shark pulling at his stringer of fish. The scent of blood had attracted the predator, which now saw the stringer as an easy meal. Carlos tried to maintain his balance, but the shark thrashed intensely, pulling him underwater. Carlos struggled to free himself, realizing that the situation was becoming dangerous. The shark's movements were powerful, making it hard for Carlos to keep his grip on the surface. He knew he had to let go of the stringer to avoid getting dragged deeper, but the shark's violent tugs made it difficult. The water churned around him as the shark thrashed, sending ripples across the surface. Finally, Carlos managed to unclip the stringer from his belt, releasing it to the hungry predator. The shark immediately focused on the catch, tearing into the fish with aggressive bites. Carlos felt relief but quickly realized that the commotion had attracted more sharks. Dark shapes appeared below him, circling in wide arcs. With his catch gone, Carlos knew his only priority was to reach the boat's safety. He tried to swim slowly toward the vessel, aware that sudden movements could provoke the sharks. His heart pounded as he made deliberate strokes, feeling the pressure of the situation weighing on him. Now numbering 3, the sharks circled closer, drawn by the lingering scent of blood in the water. Carlos kept moving, trying to keep a steady pace despite his fear. His muscles burned from the effort, but he pushed through, focused solely on reaching the boat. The sharks were now just a few meters away, their sleek bodies cutting through the water with unsettling ease. Carlos knew he was racing against time, and the boat felt close and far as he swam. Carlos kept moving, his strokes slow and deliberate to avoid triggering an attack. His body ached from exhaustion, but he forced himself to stay focused. Only a few meters away now, the boat felt like a distant sanctuary. The sharks continued to circle, each pass coming closer than the last. Carlos sensed they were testing him, drawn by the commotion and lingering scent of the fish he had released. The largest shark, a gray figure with a distinct scar along its dorsal fin, suddenly darted forward, closing the gap. Carlos's heart raced as he tried to remain calm, aware that panic could be fatal. He adjusted his swimming slightly, angling himself toward the side of the boat. The predator swam beneath him, its movements smooth but filled with a clear sense of power. Carlos finally reached the boat's ladder, his fingers gripping the rungs tightly. He pulled himself up as quickly as possible, the urgency clear in every motion. His muscles burned, but the desire to escape was stronger. Just as he hoisted his body halfway onto the ladder, the largest shark suddenly lunged, bumping against the boat's hull. The impact sent a jolt through the vessel, but Carlos held on. With one final push, Carlos managed to get himself over the side and onto the deck. He lay there for a moment, gasping for air, his body trembling from the adrenaline. The sharks circled below, their dark shapes visible in the water. The predator with the scar lingered the longest, as if unwilling to give up its pursuit. Carlos felt relief and disbelief as he watched the sharks slowly drift away, disappearing into the deeper waters. Once he caught his breath, Carlos checked his gear and removed his fins. His hands still shook from the encounter, but he knew he was safe now. He started the boat's engine, eager to leave the area quickly. The hum of the motor felt reassuring, a sound that broke the tense silence of the sea. Carlos reflected on the close call as the boat moved away from the reef. The encounter had tested his skills and instincts in ways he had not expected. While he had faced sharks before, this experience was different, marked by the sheer unpredictability of the situation. The ocean, which had always been a source of adventure, had shown its darker side. Back on shore, Carlos docked the boat and stepped onto solid ground. His legs felt weak, but he was grateful to be back. He spent the next few hours cleaning his equipment, replaying the day's events in his mind. The memory of the sharks, their sleek forms circling him in the water, remained vivid. The experience had left a lasting impact on Carlos, reminding him of the thin line between predator and prey. Despite the fear, he remained committed to spearfishing, understanding that the ocean's dangers were part of its allure. He knew he would return to the water, but with a renewed respect for the unpredictable power of the sea.